Hi, I'm Greta Oliver. Welcome to the Educate You podcast, your roadmap to learning tips, techniques, and strategies to enable your student to successfully navigate the road to and through higher education. Welcome to today's podcast. Today's guest on understanding admissions is Dr. Erin Almond. Dr. Erin Almond is the Director of Equity and Engagement at KIPP Jacksonville Schools. Dr. Allman is an experienced educator with strong leadership skills. She has a wealth of knowledge concerning student development, access, and she has worked extensively in financial aid as well as admissions. Today, she will share with us her knowledge pertaining to the admissions process as well as the functions of the admissions department to help us understand basic inner workings based upon her work experience. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Erin Almond to the Understanding Admissions segment of Educate You. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the work that you are doing. This is such important work in making sure that students and families understand this process. There's a lot of information and a lot of misinformation out there. And so the work that you're doing is critical into making sure that our students have access to whatever their post-secondary pathway is.
That's true. Thank you. And you're welcome for my part in it. I know me and you have a lot in common as far as like you caring about students and being passionate about students being able to manage their experiences in college and actually getting students to college, getting students through college as evidenced by all of your experience, your work experience in helping students. And so can you first of all just break down the admissions alphabet? It's so many terms that are thrown around and I don't think people have a real good understanding of them. And this information, while you worked at one admissions department at one college, most likely, this is information that can be generalized. People can understand because it's common to all admissions departments. So can you just start by kind of breaking down the alphabet soup?
Sure. So I think when you think about it, it is really an alphabet soup of different terms. And then within those terms mean different deadlines and different things and different requirements that we're asking of students and families. And so I think you want to start with what we would say ED or early decision. Early decision is for students who are really, I would say, committed to a school. And so they have kind of locked in and they know with confidence that a school is their first choice. In most cases, early decision is binding. So that means that if you are accepted, you have decided that, yes, I am going, and I am willing to withdraw my applications, any other applications that I've submitted to another school. There are some cases where it can be navigated, but most cases when you apply early decision, you're saying you are my first choice, essentially saying like, I want to marry you in a relationship term. And so you have that. Then you have what is called kind of like early action. And early action is for people who want to, I would say, apply early, but they still want to consider some other options. And so people, I'd say usually when you think early decision and early action, you're looking at deadlines in October and November with notifications around December and early January. So around this time of year, students are finding out if they've been accepted early decision or early action. The difference with early action is that it's not binding. And so what the benefit is that you know early, but you don't have to commit. And so you're able to say, okay, I have solidified my spot in insert school here, but I still have some time to potentially evaluate other options. I think early action is very valuable for students who are pretty sure about a school, but maybe there are some questions that they have, particularly around financial aid. And so you want to make sure that you are considering that part, whereas with early decision, you may or may not get the financial aid package that you want. And so you've kind of committed without necessarily knowing what the financial implications might be. With early action, you can say, I'm super interested, but I also want to make sure that I can keep my options open just in case something else comes along, or maybe I need to evaluate that financial aid award or something to that effect. Then you have like your rolling admissions where they are admitting students as applications are complete. So as your file is complete, as you have turned in your application, your test scores if necessary, if it requires an essay or a teacher recommendation. So once you have turned in everything, they will evaluate your file, and they will then make a decision. One of the value of rolling admission is that usually it starts very early. So you have some schools who start with rolling admission as early as, I would say, June of the year prior. So for example, here in Florida, the University of North Florida will open their applications for next fall in June of this year. So June 2022, they will open applications for fall 2023. And so you have a really long window, I would say, to decide if you're interested. The other thing is that they usually extend their application times well into the spring. So sometimes you have students who maybe have to make a change because of different personal situations. And so rolling admission can be particularly valuable because you might find yourself in March or April having to make a change. And these are schools that are still accepting and admitting students.
Okay, that makes sense. That certainly makes sense. So that's great. Okay, what would you, I just want to ask about like the sheer application process, because it looks like now students are applying to so many schools. They are, like almost counting on two hands or more. And
Yes.
so, what is the rationale with that? Does that make a difference, or, is that just wasted money really if they have to pay those application fees?
So I think it depends on the student, right? So I think that you have students, particularly I say like our low income students, where fit, the main thing that they're looking for fit is that financial decision. And so they might end up sending out several applications because they're looking to see who is really going to offer me the best financial aid package. And there are, of course, fee waivers and things that are available to help students navigate that. But in a lot of cases, sometimes it is, I don't want to say that it's bad counseling, but we haven't always done the work to kind of understand what school would be best for us. And so helping students to really understand, like, where do you see yourself? And is it on this campus? So have we helped students to understand maybe like, do you want to be at a small school or a larger school? And what does that mean to you? Because what's small to me might not be small to you.
Right.
Do you want to be close to home or far away from home? And again, what does that mean to you? And so we sometimes kind of, for some students, we've had to drill down around, like, if you had to make a choice between coming home for Thanksgiving or Christmas because you couldn't do both, would you be okay with that? Right. And so you start to kind of put that in real terms, and you kind of help students to craft a list of schools. I think major is important, but a lot of times what we have seen kind of early is that students are interested in majors that they could do anywhere. So it's like, you can major in biology anywhere. You can major in English anywhere. Is there something very specific about a school that's going to set it apart from another school? And if so, then that's where you should pursue. But I think a lot of times there's that part, there's a fit part, there's a financial part. And I think that colleges have gotten very savvy on their marketing. And so they are able to get information about students from College Board, from ACT, from all of the different things, from different college fairs, and they're able to tailor their recruitment in a way that they probably weren't able to tailor it for me, like over 20 years ago.
Right.
And so they're able to kind of key in on making students feel wanted, which is something that we all want. We have students out a number of times who will say like, oh, well, they sent me this free, if I just click here, I can fill out this application super fast and I'll get a decision in a few days. And so I think colleges have really become savvy on their marketing piece as well to try to build their applicant pool. And so I think you see a lot of things happening there, which lead to students to apply to more schools. But ultimately, I think, we all want to have options. And I think that's always the goal for students, and helping them to create a list of schools where they are in a position to choose. And I think it can be really empowering, particularly for low income students of color, to be able to have choices in a way that they may not have had before.
Right. Okay. That makes perfect sense. So what exactly, what are admissions departments actually looking for? What are they looking for in their applicant pool?
I think that changes on a year-to-year basis, but I think that ultimately, like, they want students who want to be with them, right? If you go back to this relationship piece, like, they want students who are interested in them, but also who maybe help to create a cohesive class. And we think about a cohesive class, you maybe are having diverse backgrounds, so whether that's geographical whether that is race and ethnic background, whether that is religious background, whether that is like activities. They're looking for all of that to try to craft a class that really, I think they feel like represents who they are as a college. Of course, grades matter. And of course, test scores matter. In some cases, it depends on the school and how much they matter, but those are important things to navigate. Extracurricular activities and involvement in the community. And I think we can't underscore that what that looks like and how that can be explained is varied. And so you might have a student who's like, well, I didn't play sports, but I did a lot of volunteer work with my church. That counts. Or, I wasn't able to, to do a lot of community service because I had to work and help to take care of my siblings. That matters too, right? And so I think helping to make sure that students are able to understand the inherent value that they have to offer based off of their experiences, all of that is important. And I think that schools want to know when they're shaping their class. And so I think we have to do some work with students, I think, in helping them to be comfortable in talking about that in a way that they see the value in it. Because I think it can be very easy to feel like, oh, well, I haven't done anything. And it's like, well, actually, you've done a lot. It's not the traditional thing that you might think of.
Right. And sometimes those untraditional things can kind of set that student apart from other students who have all done the traditional things. And so it's important to be able for a student to be able to like represent themselves as to what they've done, what they've gone through, what experience have shaped them, and things of that nature. So I'm thinking that would help them as far as their application would be concerned too, because I think that especially now when there hasn't been that much emphasis on maybe extracurricular activities because of the pandemic, or maybe a lot of emphasis on, other things, they have to supplement somehow. So if you can find a way, if a student can find a way to kind of set themselves apart, maybe by the way they write their essay or some kind of way that they can just differentiate themselves from all the other people trying to apply, that would go well in their favor, hopefully.
I definitely agree. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of our counseling offices are overwhelmed. And so they're not able to get that one-on-one attention to students the way that they'd like to, or usually it's kind of, you are able to deal with your top students. So your students who are your high flyers, who or, like your bottom students, your students who you're worried if they are going to graduate. And so then you have this mighty middle where I think that there are a lot of students who kind of get lost in the shuffle who fit into that category, where it's like, if someone just told them like this piece of your story is incredibly valuable, and if you just drop that into that essay, or you just, you just have that conversation with the admissions officer at the college fair, like you went to the college fair, which is great. If you just drop this in here, like that can make a difference for you. I think that would be huge.
Right. I think they do need some coaching from somewhere to try to have, a compelling essay, something that somebody can read and they can actually see. Like I want the essay to tell a story that I can just picture it, I can visualize what that student's gone through, and to show that they have, integrity, that they have maturity, and that they have, the passion basically to even be going to college or even care about college. So I think all of that can come through with the written word. So that's why one of the reasons why essays are so important. If you were to, as far as admissions departments and essays are concerned, if there was a choice between not doing an essay and doing one, what would you say? Should a student ever not do an essay if it says optional?
I think they should always do it. I think there's always a chance, because there's a way for you to tell your story. As you were just saying, there's a way for you to allow whomever is reading your application to know you beyond the numbers and whatever, your counselor or whomever has put into their recommendation letter. Sometimes it's not even a letter. Sometimes it's just a form. And so, in general, admissions officers know the territory for which they're reading for. And so they kind of have a background of the school and the community, but anything that you can do to kind of set yourself apart, I think is very important. And so, and a lot of times it doesn't have to be a very, I don't want to say you can use one essay and modify it to meet the needs of multiple schools. And so I don't want students to feel like, oh, I got to write, 8 different essays. You could write a really strong essay and then go back and do some work to modify it to see what meets the need for UNC Chapel Hill, or what meets the need for, for this other school. And so there's a way to do it and to be really smart about it. But I think if it says optional, let's just assume that it's not. And it's the option for you to set yourself apart.
I think that's great advice. So I want to ask you about some terms again, because this is kind of confusing to a lot of people. What is the difference between deferment and waitlisting?
Yeah, so deferment, usually you find that happens early in your pool. So when you have students who are applying early decision or early action, sometimes they will get deferred. And what that means is that they're going to roll that application over into the regular decision pool. So it's saying like, we don't want to accept you yet, or we're not accepting you yet. We're going to consider you within this next pool of applicants. With waitlist, it's a little different because waitlist usually comes out afterwards. So when you have like your final group of, I guess, deadlines and things like that. So if you've gone through early action, early decision, regular decision, and then you see waitlist, waitlist is essentially saying that we can't offer you a spot in the class right now, but we want you to be on this list so that should someone else not be able to attend, we can then move you into that spot. And I think it can be a bit disappointing for students to get that, because essentially it's saying, not yet. And I think that, the way I would encourage students to take it is like, you can decide. I think a lot of schools give you the option to decide if you want to remain on the wait list, or if you want to, if you have another school that you're more interested in, then you can go ahead and commit to that as well. But, again, colleges are trying to fill out their class. And so I would encourage students to know that it's less about a personal thing. You're in a wide pool of thousands of people. And so, it can be disappointing, but it does not mean that, that you're not worthy or that you're not valuable. Are doing the same thing that you're doing, which is trying to figure out what's the best class, just as you're trying to figure out what's the best school.
That sounds marvelous. I would like for all students to have somebody like you to answer these questions when they're going through these things, because it's a lot, especially for parents who really don't know what these terms mean, maybe, or they don't know how to explain that. They've never been through it. And so students sometimes are kind of alone trying to figure out things and not knowing who to ask. And so that's why all of this is so important as far as getting this information out for parents and students, so that they can have an idea of what they're dealing with as far as college admissions is concerned.
Yes. I had a personal experience with waitlist. I applied to, ultimately attended North Carolina School of Science and Math for high school. So you apply after your sophomore year going into your junior year. And the area that I grew up in the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill area, that's a very competitive area. And I was waitlisted as an applicant. And I was kind of like, oh, well, this is really disappointing. And, I had my moment of being upset about it. And then a few weeks later, I found out that I was admitted off the wait list. And so then it put me in a different position of like, so now what are you going to do? And I think it's, you can, like I said, it was very disappointing. My parents were like, it's okay. Like you made a decision to apply. It does not mean that you're not a talented student. It's there are more applicants than there are spots available.
Right.
And this is how they want to handle it for you. And ultimately I was able to be admitted off the wait list, had a great high school experience, which set me up for college. But I personally know that sting of the wait list, and, and understanding that it can be disappointing, and it can also help to set you up for, for greater things now that are down the line.
Right. Sometimes, your disappointments can, like you said, lead to better things. It just opens up the possibility of other things happening, because that one thing isn't going to happen. So you have to do something, and then you go on and find out that what you ended up doing is better than what the first choice was. And so all of that to say that good things come to those that wait.
Yes.
And there's always another opportunity. A no is just an opportunity for you to go on and find a yes. And so, we just try to keep that in mind when we're talking to students as well. So what tips can you provide for students regarding the whole entire admissions process, regardless of what school they're applying to? So what should students just be doing?
So I think students should, on a practical level, they should be organized. So making sure that they are staying on track of deadlines and what things are required, and kind of making sure they're keeping up with their counselors. Again, counselors, I think on average, counselors have around 300 to 400 students per, on their caseload. And so that's a lot to keep up with in addition to all the other administrative tasks. So on a practical level, just staying organized and making sure that they are clear on deadlines and things like that. I think that being clear on kind of like your why. So like, why am I actually pursuing college? And like, what am I pursuing college for is very important. And so I think there are some people who would say like they grew up in a college going culture where it's like, I just knew that I was going to college. Like it was always that kind of the destination. And I think there's some people who are like, this seems like a really good idea, but I don't really know what that means or how to navigate it. And so it's going to be really important to have a really compelling why, because you can get to college and you can, you run into all types of obstacles and challenges, or even just on the way. And if you don't have a really compelling why, it can be really easy to kind of to back down from that and not be as persistent in pursuing the goal as you'd like to. I think being able to speak about yourself and sell yourself in a way that is honest and maintains integrity. So like knowing who you are, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and being able to speak to that with a degree of confidence. And I think I see that is probably the hardest for students. A lot of times students haven't been given the space or the opportunity to really even reflect on like, what are the things that I'm good at? What are the things that I'm interested in? What are the things that I'm passionate about? What problem would I like to solve in the world? And so if they are able to have time to think about those things and kind of, or even do different, there are like different career assessments or different things out there that can help them kind of hone in on like, this is who I am as a person. These are the things that I care about. And this is how school will help me to get closer to, to solving that problem or being that person. I think that's really important, and it kind of grounds you in the process. And then I think just being, open to all types of possibilities. And so I will say as a student applying to college, I was super locked in on Elon. I really, really loved Elon. I thought that I wanted to, coming out of science and math, I was like, I'm in a small school. I thought that I really wanted to go to another small school. And I went and visited it and I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I couldn't tell you what I didn't love. I was just like, it's nice. And so that was kind of the reflection. And my mom was like, okay, so like we like nice, but nice is very expensive.
Right.
And so if we're gonna have expensive, then we need to love it. And so I was kind of stuck at that point because I had kind of put all my eggs in that basket of like, I really want to be at this place. And I got in really early. And so getting into UNC later down the line, I was kind of like, well, I don't really want to go because, I grew up around here and there's nothing that's new to me about UNC. And I went to visit and I was like, this is everything that I thought it was. Like it's so different. And I fell in love with it. And I didn't even want to tell my parents that they were right because like they were so right about it. And I didn't want to tell them, but it's like, so I say all that to say that, being open to the different possibilities, being able to visit if you can.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I know is like, it's hard to describe what that it feeling is, but it when you're on campus and you see other students and you start to engage. And it's like, can I see myself here, for the next 3, 4, sometimes 5 years, depending on how your classes work out. Because that's going to be really important. Can I make this home here? Are there people here where, like this feels like my community? And so I think being open to that and being willing to change your mind and not, be afraid to say like, oh, I thought it was going to be this school, but it's actually going to be something different. And being willing to venture out beyond what you thought will be great. I know a lot of times students like to pursue things because of their peers, and I don't necessarily discourage that because it can be great to go into a new environment with other people that but I also would say that it's also great to be willing to go out onto your own and kind of discover who you are and really kind of get your footing under you as a young adult and being able to navigate different situations. I think there's a freedom there that sometimes our young adults don't always have, to be able to kind of go into this as like, I am Erin Almond, and I'm not Erin Almond that you all knew for the last 12 years. Like I am a new person. And so you get to experience me without kind of all of what you may have thought you knew about me from before. So I think all of that is important, and just being willing to just challenge yourself. Don't be afraid to to apply to schools that might be considered to be reach schools.
Mm-hmm.
Be willing to challenge yourself and put yourself out there. If you feel like it's within range, then do
Mm-hmm.
it. Be willing
Okay.
to do the work and, write the essays and get the recommendation letters, and, don't always be willing to accept a no
Mm-hmm.
from certain adults, because there are some things that, like they have their own lens. And so it's like, if you feel like something is right for you, be willing to pursue that,
Mm-hmm.
and find the adults who are in your corner that will help you to pursue that as well.
Absolutely. I love it. I think it's just important. The takeaway from today's talk is basically, I think students should know themselves, like you said. They should also know what their why is, definitely know what your why is. And if possible, they need to also get on campus so that they can distinguish one campus from another. If all else fails, at least do a video tour, at least, and try to compare and contrast colleges with one another. Also, to be organized in this thing, because all the different colleges all have different deadlines, they have different windows. And when it's over and that window is shut, it's over. I mean, really, they don't have time or energy or the ability to cater to everybody's issue of why they don't have their materials submitted. Students should stay on top of their counselors as much as they can, knowing that the counselors are overworked and maybe they may need more reminders than not, but not in an intrusive and harassing way, but just to try to make sure that your application materials are received within the amount of time that they give you at each college. And just to take some really good notes between the colleges that you're actually looking at, as far as what their deadlines are. If they have fee waivers, ask for them, so that they don't have to pay that application fee if possible. And then also look for the application fee in some of the materials that the college is returning to them by email. Because a lot of people are saying that, they open up an email from somewhere that they visited and they saw, oh, if you apply, here's a fee waiver. But if you don't see it that way, to actually get on the phone or go
Yes.
there if you're
Yes.
close enough and go to the admissions office and ask about it, because a lot of times they are, more than willing to give you codes or waiver codes, application waivers, all whatever you want to call it. It means you don't have to pay when you're turning in your
Yes.
application materials, and so that's important.
You said a couple of things that just reminded me. When you think about being organized, something that we would tell our students is that we would love, it's like when you go home for winter break, that you have done all of your applications.
Mm-hmm.
Because in some ways that is freeing for your senior year to be able to fully enjoy what's happening in the spring. There are lots of things that
Absolutely.
happen. You have prom, you got grad bash, you
Mm-hmm.
senior trip, all these things. And so
Mm-hmm.
like, how wonderful would it be to enjoy all those things without this application thing kind of hanging over your head? So we try
Right.
to encourage that. And we would sometimes break it down to, maybe you want to do, if you have a student who's maybe applying to 9 schools, and kind of a breakdown of around like 3 reach, 3
Mm-hmm.
target, 3 kind of like likely schools that
Mm-hmm.
you are applying to, you got 2 or 3 in October, you're applying to 2 or 3 in November, and 2
Mm-hmm.
or 3 in December. And
Right.
then when you are opening presents for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it is that you celebrate, you are
Mm-hmm.
completely done. And
Right.
that you can be free. You are just kind of waiting for decisions, and you are managing the process on a different level
Mm-hmm.
than you are before. Other thing is around when you are reaching out to your counselors to ask them for things, you want to make sure that you're giving them enough notice. And so
Mm-hmm.
we know that things come up and we will be incredibly supportive. However, you might
Mm-hmm.
not get my best work on
Right.
recommendation if it's due next week.
Right.
And it's
Right.
not because I don't want to give you my best work. That's because there are other things that also require my best work. And so
Mm-hmm.
understanding that counselors are managing lots of different things. And so as much
Yes.
as possible, if you're able to, particularly if it's something that requires an actual letter and not just
Mm-hmm.
filling out a form, if you're
Mm-hmm.
able to give them notice. And if you're in a school where you do have a large, that your counselor has a large number of students in their
Mm-hmm.
case, you're able to provide them with some supporting documentation, or say,
Yes.
hey, here is some information
Mm-hmm.
about me that you might not know. Like, I know that
Right.
you've seen me here as a cheerleader and as as a volleyball player, but I also do these things. So here's some things to help you kind of make this recommendation letter a bit more robust and supportive of me. And so I think that is just important in the consideration of like, yes, go ahead and ask us, did we send your transcript? Because that might have gotten lost in the shuffle. But also please give us enough time so that we can do our best work in supporting you to make sure that you are being represented in the best light to the school, all angles.
Absolutely. That's the best right there. And with the letters of recommendation or anything that you were asking somebody to do for you, the biggest tip is to give a resume, give a summary. This is what I've done for the last, I don't know how many years, but have it there for the person to draw some information from, because even though you think they might know so much about you, they really don't. They don't know you like you really want them to portray you. So you need to give them that information and help them along so that it's not tedious for them to actually write a letter of recommendation for you. That's perfect. Perfect, yes. Perfect.
Help them fill in the gaps.
Yep, fill in all the gaps and be organized throughout it all. So if you're choosing
one folder, if you are I'd say like a tangible person, one folder where you can keep all your things. If you're a digital person, one Google Drive folder or Microsoft OneDrive folder where you can just drop all your stuff and quickly share a link. It will save you lots of time and lots of trouble. And when someone says, "Oh, I didn't get this," you can just quickly go in and share it one more time, or you have it where you were able to see where you last updated something. So just keep everything in one place. Have a planner, and if you don't have a planner, a digital calendar to keep yourself organized. But all of those are so important.
Yes, I use them now. I use them for everything just to keep myself organized. So I know that if I need a calendar, I have a written one, I have a digital one, all of them.
I do as well.
The whole 9 yards, just to be able to get in the right place at the right time. So I know these students need to keep this information just right at their fingertips and have everything in line, just so that, if anything goes wrong, it's not because of you. It's not because you failed to do something. At least you would have that peace of mind that you have all your stuff organized, your information is all together, you know where you can quickly access it, you can share it, you can do whatever you need to do with it, and then you can make a decision that's going to be right for you as far as fit. It always kind of breaks my heart when I think about students who don't really have the finances to attend college, and then they really want to go somewhere else, but that place does not supply them with the money that they need, or they don't have enough financial aid from other things. And so it's always, just important to just try to keep looking for financial aid, and I'll talk about that a little bit more on some of the other podcasts when we're talking about financial aid. But it just breaks my heart when the decision about a school comes down to who gives the most money or who is providing the most support. But that is just reality. It honestly is reality, and sometimes it comes to that. But just, open mind, trying to continue to get financial aid, and also knowing that what you get the first year going in does not in any way indicate what you will get in other years or where you'll be able to get it from. So it's just a tip that you can continue to look, even after you have received it, continue to look in private organizations, continue to look throughout your time. So, just don't give up just because the school that you're going to is not really providing the aid that you need. Just see if it's some other kind of way you can work it out where you can get that true fit where you love it. Like you said, you can't necessarily articulate why you love it, but this is the place where I want to be and where I can be successful, where I feel like I can graduate, where I feel like I can, make it from class to class, where I can live for 5 years, and I'm not crying every weekend because I want to be at home. I want to go home.
Please
I want to go through that.
No, you want to be at a place where you are trying to figure out, how can I stay over the summer? What can I do over winter break? Because this is what is now home for me.
Right. Absolutely.
It is so beautiful when students find that place.
Yes.
When I think about the finance part, it's so sad that it impacts so many people. And I think I could go a whole other thing about finances, but the one thing I will say is that I hope that parents are having conversations with their students early and often about what they are able to commit to their
Yes.
finances,
Yes.
to the financial aid process, because,
Mm-hmm.
I know that FAFSA might tell you one number, and I know that what the reality is of what you can contribute is something else. But
Right.
the earlier that families are able to have that conversation with their students around, like, this is what we have either put aside or what we feel
Mm-hmm.
like we can afford to do for
Right.
you every
Right.
single year, the better it is for the students, because it is so
Absolutely.
tough for a student to fall in love with the school and then be stuck trying to figure out what they can personally manage at 17 or 18,
Yes.
because there haven't been those family conversations around, this is what we are willing and or able to contribute. And so there's always
Absolutely.
money out there, and financial aid offices, you need to know who your counselor is and go talk
Mm-hmm.
to them and ask questions and seek additional scholarships. But I think
Yes.
that first step is making sure that as a family we have had a conversation around, like,
Mm-hmm.
here's what we can
Mm-hmm.
afford, and as
Right.
a result, here's what we think as a family might be the best next step for you.
Absolutely.
And then you're able to go on from there. But that is
Yes.
a very hard conversation. I will say that was one thing. I was fortunate to receive a full scholarship to UNC, and so when we were having these conversations and I was still kind of waffling around Elon, my mom said, listen,
Mm-hmm.
she was like, it's going to be a lot easier for you to love UNC when you don't have to worry about the money. I'm
Absolutely.
the oldest of four, and so there are
Mm-hmm.
two sisters and a brother, and so she, just very frank around, like, college is expensive, and I want you to be somewhere that you love it, and
Mm-hmm.
and we will be able to better support you as a family if we are not also trying to give money to Elon, because we have
Right.
to we have to pay this. And so it was a hard conversation, but I appreciated her being honest with me on
Right.
the front end around, like, one, you didn't 100% love that school, but
Mm-hmm.
two, on a financial front, we as a family will be able to better support what you're doing if you're
Mm-hmm.
going to a school where they have kind of met all of your financial needs.
Yes, yes. That worked out perfectly for you, actually. It's not that perfect for everybody, but I do think that conversation is very, very important. A lot of parents have a real issue, like they're revealing some secret or something about what they have as far as finances is concerned, set aside or able to help with college expenses, and what you don't want to really have to put anything on your kid. You don't necessarily want your child to have the burden of being a employee as well as a student, when really all they're trying to do is get an education. So I think that is such an important conversation to have, just honestly. This is it. And I think if that's had early enough, that conversation is had early enough, then some of that kind of pie in the sky kind of thought, that student may have for going to XYZ
Mm-hmm.
college, it might not even come into the question. It's like, okay, that's too expensive. And, if that's the reality, that's the reality. Now, if you want to go somewhere that's really expensive and you're willing to do work study, you're willing to take out loans, you're willing to do all that, that's a whole nother conversation. But the initial one of what the parent can contribute, regardless of what the EFC or what the FAFSA says or whatever,
Right.
that's very, very important. And that's good that you had that. So many students need to know what the deal is. Can you help me or not?
Yes.
Bottom line.
And I have been on the other side in the financial aid office
Hmm.
with parents who said, but I promised them if they got in, we would make it work.
And see, that's not
And
ever anything you
I
should
feel
do.
like, I'm so sorry,
Yes.
because this is the best that we can do.
Yes.
Working at a
Yes.
school that was very generous with financial aid, or,
Hmm.
they would say, oh, well, we got a better offer from insert school, and you should take it,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
and I think it's hard, again, with when families have you have seen that your student loves the school and you want to
Hmm.
make that happen for them.
Right.
And then there is also kind of the reality, like, there are some elements of college that are the same
Hmm.
regardless of where you are. And even, I think, especially when you consider, some of your state schools, some of your
Hmm.
more elite schools, there are elements of them that are very similar, whether you
Hmm.
are at school A or school B. And so they don't, it sounds bad to be like, you don't really know what you're missing if you
Hmm.
don't go to the school that you thought that you loved. but we are saving you from, from mountains of debt. We are
Yes,
saving
yes.
you from, we're doing this to kind of protect your future in some sort of way. But yeah, there have been several times where I would hear parents say, like, they've loved this school since they were 5, and we promised them that if they got in, that we would make it happen. And I was like, this is the best that we
Mm-hmm.
can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that you are in this position where you have to have that conversation with your student now. And so again,
Mm-hmm.
for parents, having the conversation early and often, but
Yes.
also I would encourage them, do not make those promises just because there's so many things that are happening in our country.
Right.
Our world is not 100% stable, and so
Right.
you
Right.
never know what might happen that might change that. And so being careful with the language that you're
Mm-hmm.
using as you're
Mm-hmm.
communicating
Mm-hmm.
around those financial obligations to your students can be really, really helpful. Just like, we will do our best to
Yes.
support you
Mhm.
at your school. This is what,
Right.
being clear on that, as opposed to, if that's what you want, then you can have it, because
Right. Right.
things come
You don't
across
want to
very
do that.
different.
That is life lesson number one. I don't make promises. I do not. I do not ask anyone, and my kids ask anyone. I don't. I'll say I'll try, and I really will try. But blanket promises, that's not something I'm going to do, because I try to exercise as a person of integrity. I like to mean what I say, say what I mean what I say. I want people to understand that when I do say something, you could take that to the bank unless it is some kind of life threatening emergency,
Right.
honestly. We know those things happen, but for things that I can control, I'm not going to promise you that it's not going to happen. I'd rather tell you I'll do my best. And I started that when my kids were really young, because I just don't like, I don't like that situation where people are looking at you like you said, you promised, you this, you that. I don't want anybody to ever say that to me and I not be able to deliver on something that I was so adamantly talking about I was going to do or promise to someone. And so
Right.
it's just life lessons right here. It's like, okay, this is what we can do. This is what we can try to help you, but up to a certain amount. This is a limit. There's a limit. It's
Right.
just not going to be, out your pocket every time you need something, because there's more to the expense of college than just room and board and books.
Right.
There's a lot of expense. Organizations, if people are in them, they have to sometimes pay for
Yes.
that. It's all the little supplies, all the books, all the, library fines, medical fees,
Parking
all of that
tickets.
stuff. Everything, everything, we were kind of shocked when our kids went to school, because we looked at those bills. And it's like everything is broken down: instructional fee, educational fee. They have a fee for if you go to the health center. They have a
Yes.
fee for the library fines. I mean, before you know it, it's like a huge itemized list of every single thing, and the tuition and the room and board. And then, that's just one little small part of
Yeah.
what that bill is.
The fees, and so the thing is,
Yes.
even with the fees, it's like, if you don't use something on campus, like, you're essentially not using something that you've already paid for.
Paid
So it's
for,
like,
exactly.
you if you don't go to the health center when you're
Yes.
not, like, you already paid for that. So it's like,
Right,
that's kind of
right.
like money that's
So you
wasted.
might want to go over there every
Right.
now and then, just because.
Just because
Yes,
when I
yes.
was in graduate school, they had a transportation fee, and if you could opt out of it, but if you opted out of it, you could not take the campus buses. So
Okay. Hmm.
they would connect it to your student ID card, and so you'd go and try to swipe your student ID card, and it would say no, so because you
Hmm.
opted out of this
Right.
transportation fee. And so it's like, I think sometimes students can feel like, oh, maybe I can be savvy about some certain things. And there are some things
Nope.
that you can be savvy on. You can be savvy on, like, you don't have to have a single room.
Yes.
You have to
True.
have the largest meal plan.
Right.
But there are some things that, like, you are absolutely going to have to pay for.
Hmm.
And you should make sure that you're taking full advantage of that. And
That's true.
it's like, these student organization fees, you're going to pay that whether you join an organization or not. So you might as well join
Hmm.
one.
Hmm.
And there are all these other things that are there. And,
Yes. Yes.
the cost of transportation to get to and from school every single time you want to come home.
Yes. Yes. Especially
All
if you're
those
out of
things.
state or you're far away from your college.
Yes. Or if
All of that.
you're going to school in a different climate where now you need a winter jacket where you've never had a winter jacket. That's all of my people in Florida going anywhere north of
Absolutely.
it's so cold.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes,
so there are all
yes.
these different expenses that come into play that we don't always think of, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that are well beyond what is included on the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the thing that you need to kind of to create in some ways the life that you want to have or that you hope to have
Mm-hmm.
as a student on campus.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to thank you so much for giving us quite a bit of information about admissions, the admissions definitions, all of that made it clearer, so for us to understand like what all this stuff means. And also, the fact that, your tips about organization, your tips about everything has been, invaluable for us. And so I just want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much. And we will
Thank
see
you.
you soon.
Yes, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and I hope that this is helpful for students and families as they are out there trying to figure out what the next best step is.
Thank you for joining us today on Educate You. If you wish, you can send me your questions or comments about the college going process or the podcast contents by sending an email to Dr. Greta at gretaoliverconsulting.com. Also, beginning each week after the podcast airs, check for a companion blog on my website's blog page at gretaoliverconsulting.com. My book, College Roadmap, Essential Tips for First-Time College Students and Their Families, is available for sale on Amazon.com. Join us next week for another tip or strategy to make the road to higher education easier for your student.